Welcome to our movie recaps. The latest doomsday science fiction TV series, Helgoland 513, shook the screens. A terrible virus had swept across the entire world, leaving only a few survivors struggling amidst the ruins. However, in a place far from the mainland, there existed a paradise, Helgoland, the only virus-free place on Earth. The people here had built protective walls using abandoned giant wheels and barbed wire. Anyone attempting to forcibly land on the island would be mercilessly shot dead. Today, the island welcomed a new life, but it also meant one resident would have to leave, because the island's resources could only sustain 513 people. This elderly person was chosen as the sacrificial victim. The highest leader of Helgoland, Lisa, had been waiting outside for a long time. Both sides chose silence in the face of this inevitable decision. Then, a group of people followed the old man slowly towards the sea. The old man bid farewell to his family at the cliff's edge, then resolutely dashed towards the 1,000-foot cliff. However, his noble decision did not bring balance to the island. Shortly after his departure, the pregnant woman gave birth to another child, a sudden and unexpected occurrence that left everyone present feeling uneasy. The next day, the island's leader, Lisa, convened the management team to discuss countermeasures. They pointed fingers at Dr. Mark, believing he had benevolently concealed the fact of twins. Mark countered that not even ultrasound could predict what was inside a belly. He urged everyone to accept this extra life. However, Lisa believed that the number 5113 was a result of scientific calculation, and if they didn't adhere to the rules, chaos would ensue on the island. Therefore, everyone agreed not to set a precedent and decided to vote later to select the person to be executed. This news immediately caused a stir on the small island, but most people weren't worried for themselves because the island operated on a points-based ranking system. The residents were ranked according to their abilities and performance. In other words, the eliminated person would be chosen from those at the bottom. Chris, ranked third from the bottom, became emotional upon seeing this news. Just because he accidentally damaged a truck at work, his points plummeted. He stated on the spot that he would refuse to jump off the cliff if chosen, but his companions joked that he could choose the pig cage instead. Elise, ranked second from the bottom, was elderly and unable to work due to her age, plus her solitary and unflattering personality had kept her points from rising over the years. The man ranked at the bottom was Eddie, labeled as a criminal on the island because he stole painkillers from the hospital during an illness. Despite his efforts to work hard afterward, he couldn't shake off the stigma of being a criminal. By the way, if you enjoy our movie recaps, we're currently hosting a giveaway for our audience. We're excited to announce that a brand new scooter awaits one lucky subscriber. Don't miss out. Subscribe and follow us to stay tuned for more updates. On this island, Mark, as a doctor, and his son held a unique status. They had their own exclusive laboratory where they had been researching vaccines against the virus. However, due to the scarcity of drugs, Mark's vaccine research had made no progress. This day was designated as Food Distribution Day on the island. People lined up to collect meager supplies. Mark also carried a basket to pick out food. Unexpectedly, he collided with a young boy while turning around, causing a bottle of pickles to fall and shatter on the ground. In the current situation of severe food shortage, this bottle of pickles seemed particularly precious. The boy felt guilty for losing a portion of his family's food, while Chris saw this as an opportunity to gain some points. He quickly took out his own apple and handed it to the boy, comforting him that it wasn't his fault. This act successfully caught the attention of Lisa nearby, who immediately praised Chris's noble character and instructed her subordinates to add a point to his ranking. While all eyes were drawn to this spectacle, the troublemaker Henry wasn't idle. Knowing that Eddie's family had been receiving limited food rations due to his criminal background, he told Eddie that he could provide them with food, but only if his wife came alone to collect it. Lisa saw through Henry's provocative behavior, which would have resulted in deductions for others, but being her son, she turned a blind eye. Soon, it was time for the island's voting assembly, where a resident would be chosen as the sacrifice. Because of Chris's previous act of sharing food at the supermarket, his ranking rose to 4th from the bottom. The sacrificial person would be chosen from the bottom 3. The voting result was unsurprising. Almost everyone voted for Eddie. Upon hearing this dreadful news, Eddie and his wife became emotional. Then, his wife slowly stood up and exposed Henry's act of forcing her with food in front of everyone. The explosive revelation immediately caused a commotion among the crowd. People dismissed it as a joke and didn't believe her. Lisa also clearly defended her son. However, Mark on the side encouraged the revelation to continue. Soon, more women who had traded their bodies for food stepped forward. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Henry reluctantly admitted the truth. Disapprovingly, she sought refuge with her mother, but Mark reminded Lisa to uphold the island's laws, just as she had once refused him for the same reason. Lisa understood that if she didn't act justly now, her position as island leader might be compromised. After another round of voting, Henry became the sacrificial person. Although under his mother's insistence he wasn't required to jump off the cliff or be immersed in the pig cage, being sent to the mainland was essentially no different from death. This day was the day for the exchange of goods between the island and mainland survivors. The escort team also threw out the eliminated Henry onto the road. Mark's son also participated in this escort mission. He was very worried about his son leaving the island for the first time. Before leaving, he instructed the female captain to take good care of his son. Shortly afterward, the escort team's boat entered the devastated city. At a small dock, they had to drop off Henry first to fend for himself. But as soon as Henry disembarked, his previous arrogance vanished. He told everyone that his mother had hoarded many scarce resources, hoping to use them as leverage to return to the island. Upon hearing this news, everyone was shocked and angry. However, because they needed to hurry to the next destination, they didn't bother with this troublemaker. Meanwhile, there was a minor malfunction in the island's water system. When Lisa arrived after hearing the news, she found the engineer Yuri already repairing it. Upon learning that he was the only one who understood the technology, Lisa exploded in anger. She couldn't tolerate someone monopolizing technology, especially like Dr. Mark. The item her subordinates handed her next sent shivers down her spine. Owning a radio on the island was illegal. Could someone be secretly contacting the outside world? But with insufficient evidence at hand, Lisa had to let it go for now. On the other side, the escort team had arrived at the trading location. The captain ordered Mark's son to stay and guard the ship while she led the majority to trade. When they arrived at the agreed-upon location, a man named Count arrived as expected. He was responsible for the long-term exchange of goods between the island and the mainland. Just as both sides were exchanging pleasantries, a man rushed out from behind the escort team, excitedly claiming to be a mechanic and hoping to live on the island. The captain brought back 2 full boxes of food from the island. Count was delighted to see fresh fruit because on the mainland, the virus had almost wiped out all living creatures. As part of the exchange, he also gathered medicines and fuel. Although the medicines were expired, they were better than nothing. Meanwhile, the doctor's son on the other ship hadn't yet explored the majority of the vessel, so he decided to look around. In front of an old warehouse, he encountered a man who threw a bottle of medicine at him. At a glance, the doctor's son recognized it as flu vaccine and still within its expiration date. The man then proposed taking the doctor's son to the storage cabin for medicine. Intrigued by the prospect of acquiring these medicines to develop a virus vaccine with his father, he decided to take the risk and go. Soon, they arrived at a dark ship interior where the man indeed produced a box of brand new medicine. However, he now demanded a trade-off for them all to live on the island. The seriousness of the situation dawned on the doctor's son, but fortunately, he was armed. After scaring them off with a gunshot, he fled. On the other side, the captain successfully completed the trade. As the group headed to the dock, An old man suddenly jumped out halfway and tackled the fat man. They began to struggle, and the old man managed to remove the fat man's gas mask. He raised his hand to deliver a fatal blow when the captain decisively shot him down. However, without his protective gear, it seemed that the fat man had already been exposed to the virus. Upon reaching the dock, the captain noticed the absence of the doctor's son. She intended to wait for him here, but the other selfish team members couldn't care less. They didn't want to stay in this cursed place for a moment longer. Fortunately, the doctor's son soon arrived at the shore and saw his family's ship. Without hesitation, he jumped aboard. However, he quickly realized that his protective suit had a crack. While he was at a loss, the man from earlier suddenly jumped onto the ship. Soon after, the escort team successfully returned to the island. The fat man and the doctor's son were immediately put under emergency isolation. Mark breathed a sigh of relief upon learning that his son was uninjured. The doctor's son then informed him about the discovery of new drugs, but Mark suspected that the bottle might contain water because many people had used this method to deceive the island before. After checking on his son, Mark began examining the fat man next, but the fat man's condition was already apparent. He had been coughing incessantly since his return, and when he removed his suit, a red rash appeared, causing Mark and his son's faces to change drastically. The small island of 513 people had just lost a key technical backbone to a bombing. To fill this void, they issued a recruitment notice, which immediately attracted a large number of applicants from outside the island who had long dreamed of such an opportunity. However, Helgoland only needed capable and skilled individuals. Eventually, they selected 2 doctors from the numerous applicants. The interview was conducted by Dr. Mark on the island, who asked both candidates questions based on medical knowledge from textbooks. The responses from both the black and white candidates were professional and impeccable. The island's management was pleased with their performance. However, only one person could be chosen to live on the island. So, Lise initiated a vote as usual. The white candidate was accepted with a narrow margin of 1 vote. Mark, who cast the deciding vote, was not racially biased. In his view, the white candidate's surgical expertise held more technical value. Upon learning the interview results, Yuri, the water plant engineer, was almost devastated because the black candidate was his wife. For years, he had worked tirelessly just to bring his wife to the island. Yuri, in despair, told Lisa he wanted to leave, but the response he received stunned him in place.
Tut mir leid, aber ich kann sie nicht gehen lassen. Ich brauche sie. Ich meine, wegen der Wasserwiederaufbereitungsanlage.
By the way, if you enjoy our movie recaps, we're currently hosting a giveaway for our audience. We're excited to announce that a brand new scooter awaits one lucky subscriber. Don't miss out. Subscribe and follow us to stay tuned for more updates. Meanwhile, Dr. Mark conducted a blood test on his son, but the results left him somewhat hopeless. Luckily, the medication his son brought back was genuine. It seemed the only solution now was to go to the mainland. Mark informed Lisa of this news, hoping to get permission to leave the island to find medicine to save his son. However, Lisa showed no interest in developing antiviral vaccines. To her, without the virus, there would be no power. At the same time, she also wanted Mark to conceal the fat boy's condition because Lisa didn't want the islanders to panic. On the other side, the abandoned Henry encountered a healthy old grandmother on the mainland. He was curious how the old woman managed to survive the virus's onslaught. The old woman told him the method was simple: maintain distance and disinfect with alcohol. But one must be careful not to get it on clothes, because that's how her daughter was burned alive. In the laboratory, Mark, lacking his capable assistant, his son, had to bring in a deputy physician for help. Mark had never passed on his medical skills over the years. In this dog-eat-dog post-apocalyptic world, without unique skills, Teaching apprentices could easily lead to the demise of the master. Today, he ordered the guards to go to the mainland and capture 2 people for experimentation. Although these 2 individuals were as thin as sticks, they weren't infected with the virus. Mark's purpose in capturing them was surprisingly to conduct live experiments, injecting the virus into their bodies and then using his own vaccine to see if it could detoxify. The whole process was entirely left to fate. The deputy physician, upon learning the truth, was deeply shocked, but in order to learn the technology of vaccine development from Mark, he ultimately chose to remain silent. However, before the experiment results came out, the fat team member was given a meal box. Mark's son watched them being carried away. Although his father hadn't told him the test results, he seemed to already know his fate. A few days later, the residents of the small island gathered together. The fat boy's name had been removed from the scoreboard, indicating a vacancy. After a brief moment of silence for the fat boy, Lise took the lead in accusing the incident. She believed the blame should fall on the captain of the guard, who should be demoted and docked points as punishment. The captain, of course, vehemently objected.
Beatrice, jetzt sind wir doch mal ehrlich. Wer schickt uns denn aufs Festland? Als Kanonenfutter an vorderster Front, um unser Leben zu riskieren und für euch die Drecksarbeit zu erledigen.
Seeing the scene escalating, Lisa exerted her power. Almost everyone voted to support her decision, while Mark, casting his vote against, lowered his head. Although he knew it was futile resistance, he had always adhered to his principles over the years. At this moment, there was a violent cough from the last row of the venue. Although these underage individuals temporarily lacked voting rights, they were already tired of the power struggles on the island. Accompanied by increasingly loud coughs, the uninformed residents immediately covered their faces and fled for their lives. The next day, Lisa called for an emergency meeting to discuss the incident where young people openly challenged her authority. Lisa came up with a solution. Although there was a provision on the island that exempted underage individuals from punishment if they were tied to their parents and their misdeeds affected their parents' points, it could effectively manage these young people. Mark, finding this absurd, reluctantly raised his hand in opposition, but the voting result was clear. On the mainland, the Count found the dead drug courier by the shore. From him, his men found a bottle of unexpired vaccine. The Count immediately ordered his men to capture the drug courier's companions. Among the crowd, one arrogant person stood out. After some thought, the cunning Count realized his close relationship with the deceased drug courier. As expected, he told the Count where the drugs were hidden and that there were advanced experimental equipment on the ship. Knowing the Count's desire to occupy the small island, he proposed to exchange conditions. In exchange for revealing the location of the drugs and equipment, he wanted to be taken to live on the island. The Count readily agreed to this request. In the apocalypse, having both weapons and food would easily enable one to dominate a continent. Although the Count was a king on the mainland, he had grown tired of the disgusting rabbit burgers and set his sights on Helgoland Island, which was rich in resources. Not only did it have fresh fruits and vegetables, but also a doctor capable of deciphering viruses. For years, the Count had been waiting for the right moment to attack, and the son of the island's ruler they had just captured was the key to realizing his dream. Henry, who was cowardly and afraid of death, spilled all the information about the small island. He not only revealed the defense vulnerabilities of Helgoland, but also volunteered to lead the Count. On the other side of the small island, there was turmoil brewing. Underage Fiona accidentally got pregnant after tasting forbidden fruit. Knowing the severe consequences without quotas, her selfish mother, to safeguard her own points, secretly put abortion pills into her tea. Fiona had a rebellious boyfriend like herself, who was imprisoned by Lisa's men for refusing military service. Seeing the younger generation becoming increasingly difficult to manage, Lisa sought out their leader, Fiona, promising her a more decent job. However, Fiona was tired of their petty games and would rather continue cleaning toilets than compromise her principles. Meanwhile, the only power station on the small island encountered problems. The administrator inadvertently found a bottle of top-quality liquor in the toolbox. Faced with this currently scarce treasure, the administrator immediately hid it away secretly. He ended up getting heavily drunk during work. At this moment, engineer Yuri arrived at the power station. His resentment towards the island for refusing his wife's entry had festered in him. Feeling trapped in a place where he couldn't come and couldn't escape, Yuri lost all motivation to live. He ruthlessly smashed the main axis of the windmill. The intoxicated administrator could only stare blankly in the control room, knowing he would be docked points for his negligence. He risked his life and climbed up the windmill to try to remedy the situation. Soon, the ambulance brought the administrator to Dr. Mark's clinic. Since Mark and the deputy physician were not experts in surgery, and the recently hired white candidate had not arrived yet, they had to make the decision to amputate to save his life. As the surgery neared its end, the fake doctor finally arrived. Mark called her to come and help immediately, but she nervously ran outside to stall for time. Afterwards, Mark immediately exposed her identity as a fake doctor. It turns out the fake doctor had done his homework thoroughly to be able to get onto the island. He memorized thick medical textbooks word for word, and combined with the basic knowledge he had learned as a yoga instructor, he understood everything except surgery. His efforts to come here were not solely for this purpose. The fake doctor claimed to be able to save Mark's son, and even said the island would soon undergo changes. Just as Mark was left dumbfounded by this revelation, the deputy physician burst in angrily. She had heard their entire conversation clearly. For years, she had been subordinate to Mark, and this resentment and frustration drove her mad. After venting her anger, the deputy physician intended to report to Lisa, but the mysterious fake doctor certainly wouldn't let him leave. Mark was stunned by this fierce woman. He even suspected the fake doctor was a martial arts coach. Despite her malicious intent, Mark didn't intervene. At this moment, he believed his son's life was more important. Therefore, he witnessed the fake doctor's final fatal blow. Shortly after, the deputy physician's disappearance raised suspicion from Lisa. He successfully found evidence at the scene, but he knew Mark was irreplaceable on the island, and even a heinous criminal wouldn't be punished. Therefore, his purpose in coming here wasn't to seek accountability, but to ensure support for himself in tomorrow's vote. Engineers are sentenced to death just for damaging the power facilities, while doctors who commit murder can go unpunished. It's ridiculous that this was the result of a vote by all 513 residents of the island. So, what kind of magic does the island owner Lisa possess to make so many highly educated elites become accomplices in sinking? Rewind to the eve of the virus outbreak. Mark was preparing to return to the island of Helgoland with his son. However, unlike before, security demanded negative proof from everyone boarding the island. The authorities' unusual behavior made Mark uneasy. He urged his wife, also a doctor, to hurry back to the island for a reunion, but she had an important mission on her end. She was about to extract virus samples from patient 0, crucial for future vaccine development. Upon returning to the island, Mark wanted to buy some food for his son at the supermarket. However, it was already crowded, and the shelves were empty as residents who learned about the virus were preparing to stockpile. The supermarket owner stopped them, citing low inventory. Mark managed to push his way inside, but all the food was gone from the shelves. Just as he worried about food for his son, the supermarket attendant Lisa offered to help. Although Mark didn't know this helpful woman, his reputation as a medical doctor was well known on the island. Lisa's careful and professional recommendations impressed Mark. Despite being just an employee now, Lisa exhibited a strong desire to take charge in every situation. Her next move shocked the boss even more. Lisa told the anxious residents to come back tomorrow morning because a large batch of supplies was on the way, promising that all goods would be sold at half price. Upon hearing this great news, people immediately went home satisfied to sleep. However, the boss behind them was dumbfounded. He thought, "Okay, you lied to people, but why make yourself a scapegoat with my own property?"
Und komm verrückt. Warum denn nicht 14? Warum nicht 18? Aber alles was...
Mark witnessed the embarrassing scene from start to finish. Just as he was about to pay and leave, Lisa waved her hand and told him it was free of charge. She clearly had the demeanor of a true boss. A few minutes later, she seized another opportunity. This seemingly not-so-bright employee accidentally knocked over a pile of goods. If the boss found out, he would have worked for nothing that year. Lisa saw this as a perfect opportunity. Pointing to the news on TV about global chaos caused by the virus, she told him that it was already the end of the world, so why work for a heartless boss? Why abide by laws that are about to disappear? Her words seemed to awaken the man, as if from a dream. More young colleagues were attracted by her words. Taking advantage of the momentum, Lisa continued, stating that in the face of impending food shortages, they should make full use of their natural advantages. If all went well, not only could they survive in harsh conditions, but they could also turn the situation around beautifully. This grand blueprint was extremely tempting to the young people, who admired Lisa's forward-thinking wisdom. Thus, her startup team was officially formed in the supermarket. By the way, if you enjoy our movie recaps, we're currently hosting a giveaway for our audience. We're excited to announce that a brand new scooter awaits one lucky subscriber. Don't miss out. Subscribe and follow us to stay tuned for more updates. Meanwhile, the former mayor found Mark. He informed Mark that all the doctors on the island were blocked from the outside world, leaving only one old veterinarian. He hoped Mark would join forces with him to fight the virus. That night, Mark continued to urge his wife to hurry back, but the situation there seemed to be not as expected. His wife discovered that the virus had begun to mutate rapidly. Faced with the dilemma of family and work, she was also undecided. After a night of organizing, Lisa had transformed the supermarket into her desired appearance. All the shelves were stocked with easily distinguishable canned goods, and the huge floor-to-ceiling windows were completely covered. When the boss saw this scene, he was baffled once again. He quickly realized that Lisa was trying to take over. Initially, he wanted to engage in a civilized discussion with her, but seeing the hostile employees, he reluctantly chose to give up. Soon after, the revamped supermarket opened for business, but all residents were only allowed to purchase limited quantities. Long-haired man expressed dissatisfaction with this ridiculous rule on the spot.
Falls irgendjemand anders als ich durch diese Tür kommt, einfach abdrücken!
Verstanden, Boss. Geladen und entsichert. Na los, versüß mir den Tag, Punk!
Bitte Leute, gehen Sie ein bisschen zur Seite. Ja? Sicher ist sicher.
Alles klar.
That night, Long-haired man and his gang arrived with weapons for revenge. Unluckily, the boss had just finished work. Long-haired man's demand was quite simple, to get some supplies. He coerced the boss, hoping to enter the supermarket. It was at this critical moment that Lisa launched her first ever vote in her life. Of course, a significant speech was essential before starting. She exaggerated the benefits and drawbacks of opening the doors, directly impacting the voting outcome.
Wer ist dafür, dass wir aufgeben? Wer ist für das Opfer?
The boss looked at the ruthless Lisa with emotional turmoil, regretting his decision to let the wolf in. Even more surprising was long-haired man. He only intended to teach this woman a lesson, but now found himself in a difficult situation. In this way, Lisa not only gained control of the island's food, but also acquired weapons delivered to her doorstep. Wanting to turn the Eastland into her true empire seemed a bit strained with just these 2 points. So, she sought out the Eastland's sheriff. Using her excellent persuasive skills, she promised him the position of chief of security and ample food supply. Under such conditions, it was only natural that the sheriff wouldn't refuse. As expected, he tacitly agreed. After resolving the issue with force, Lisa turned to Mark to stand by her side. She handed over all medical resources on the island to Mark, and the entire process was recorded by her exclusive journalist and broadcasted on local television. With this move, Lisa's prestige skyrocketed. The mayor convened a meeting of all island residents that day, comforting them to face the virus with a positive attitude and assuring everyone that the government could guarantee survival. However, Lisa directly exposed this lie, providing a vivid analysis of the current situation and informing people that she controlled the island's food supply. With just this leverage, she gained a significant advantage, rendering the mayor's feeble slogans worthless. Then, Lisa proposed to punish long-haired man for murder and robbery, rallying all residents to vote. It was only then that Mark and the mayor realized what was happening. Even the regular army was turning against them, indicating that this place was about to become lawless territory. That night, Mark informed his wife of the terrible changes on the island, while his wife shared her new breakthroughs regarding the virus. However, at that moment, a group of thugs stormed into the hospital. They not only destroyed medical equipment, but also killed all the doctors, including Mark's wife. This illogical scene seemed somewhat comedic, as if the director wanted to emphasize Mark's importance later in the story, but couldn't think of another plot twist. So they arranged this absurd scene. Meanwhile, after solidifying her power, Lisa continued to buy people's loyalty. She approached the old veterinarian, hoping to enlist her support. Knowing that she had diabetes and insulin was a scarce resource, Lisa knew she wouldn't risk her life. During their conversation, Lisa noticed an advertisement on the calendar from a hotel boasting 513 rooms. This sparked an idea in her mind. She immediately fabricated a lie about the need to control the population on the island, because experts had calculated that only 513 people could be sustained, while the current population was around 1,000. So, how could they quickly reduce the population? Lisa soon devised a cruel plan. The next day, she secretly took the old veterinarian to the beach, where many virus carriers had been abandoned. Despite the risk of infection, they extracted the virus. Then, they randomly visited islanders' homes, ostensibly to administer vitamin injections, but in reality, they spread the virus without their victims' knowledge. When the victims fell ill, the waiting security team took care of them. However, Lisa eventually deemed this method inefficient and too risky. Instead, she thought of Mark, the doctor. She deceived Mark into conducting virus screenings for all islanders, with the test results manipulated by them. Those whom she disliked were diagnosed as positive. Although Mark eventually discovered this shocking secret, he chose to remain silent to survive. Ultimately, half of the residents were forced to leave the island overnight, leaving exactly 513 people behind. This story is recounted by Mark as he reflects on his memories in isolation. Facing his dying son, Mark's last remaining motivation to survive fades. He records all of Lisa's and his own crimes, hoping Fiona will expose the truth. However, at that moment, the fake doctor, armed with a gun, arrives. She was likely a mole arranged by the Count, but her motives remain unclear. Perhaps the Count intended to continue the lie, or maybe the timing for disclosure was not yet ripe. In the end, the Count finally locates a medical ship with advanced scientific equipment, which seems to hold the key to defeating the virus.